Welcome to an explainer that's going to completely reframe how you look at the modern global economy.
There is a 100-mile stretch of Taiwanese coastline that, if it went dark tomorrow, would stop the modern world in its tracks. Now, look, this isn't the plot of some hypothetical geopolitical thriller. It's just the structural reality of the terrifyingly fragile supply chains that run our everyday lives.
Chapter 1. The Invisible Monopoly.
Okay, so take a look at the sheer scale of dominance here. You are looking at one single company, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC. They manufacture a staggering 90% of the world's most advanced chips and over 60% of all global foundry capacity. I mean, to put that into perspective, imagine if just one single company produced 90% of the world's oil or 90% of its steel. That's the level of concentration we're talking about, sitting right there in one single geographic footprint.
And when you break it down by nanometer size, you can really see how this near-total monopoly plays out. When we talk about advanced chips, those incredibly tiny 10, 7, and 5 nanometer nodes powering all our cutting-edge tech, TSMC has essentially left major competitors like Samsung completely in the dust. As these chips get smaller and vastly more complex, TSMC's dominance just completely swallows the market.
So how exactly did they pull off this unprecedented market capture? Well, it all comes down to their pure-play foundry model. Essentially, TSMC decided early on, hey, we are never going to design our own chips. We'll strictly manufacture chips designed by other people. Because they never compete with their clients, there's absolutely zero fear of intellectual property theft. That one strategic choice made them the ultimate, most trusted manufacturing partner for the biggest, most secretive tech giants on Earth.
Chapter 2. How it happened. Now, this monopoly definitely wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate, decades-long strategy. If we trace this back to the 70s and 80s, the Taiwanese government aggressively pushed sustained investment policies and actively recruited global tech talent. But the absolute turning point? That was 1987, when a visionary engineer named Morris Chang was brought back to Taiwan to found TSMC, which fundamentally changed the semiconductor industry forever.
But here's the thing. They didn't just build a few standalone factories. They built the Hsinchu Science Park. This is a massively dense, basically unreplicable knowledge network and industrial cluster. You've got packaging, design, and highly specialized materials suppliers all co-located in one super tight geographic radius. By the way, these manufacturing facilities, they're thousands of times cleaner than a hospital operating room. And if a highly calibrated machine breaks down, the exact spare part and the one specialized technician who knows how to fix it are literally right down the street. That deep physical integration is exactly why you can't just copy and paste this ecosystem into another country.
Chapter 3. What runs on it?
All right, let's make this abstraction concrete, because the dependency here goes way, way beyond just laptops. There is a TSMC-made chip in literally every new Apple iPhone. NVIDIA's entire artificial intelligence revolution, those massive GPUs powering modern AI data centers, fabricated by TSMC. That modern car sitting in your driveway has up to 1,400 chips inside it, governing everything from the airbag deployment to the anti-lock brakes. Even national defense relies entirely on this island. The advanced radars and guidance components in the F-35 fighter jet trace right back to Taiwan. It's a true, literal single point of failure for the global economy.
And that brings us to the actual stakes here. If this supply chain is somehow severed, whether by conflict, blockade, or a natural disaster, Bloomberg Economics estimates that the global economy would lose $10.6 trillion in the very first year alone.
To put that staggering number into perspective, we are talking about a roughly 10% plunge in global GDP. That would be significantly more devastating than the 2008 global financial crisis, and it would completely dwarf the initial economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Factory lines would literally halt worldwide. Global production of smartphones, vehicles, vital medical electronics, all of it would stall almost overnight, creating this huge cascading crisis across every single sector of modern life.
Chapter 4. The Fragility.
For decades now, Taiwan has relied on what policy folks call the Silicon Shield. This is essentially the theory that destroying Taiwan's foundries would be so economically catastrophic to everyone, both China and the West, that it serves as a massive deterrent against any major power trying to alter the status quo by force. The resulting global pain, the logic goes, would just be way too high for anyone to risk.
But concentrating the world's most critical technology in one single geographic zone creates an extreme multi-layered vulnerability. We aren't just talking about geopolitical cross-strait tension here.
Taiwan sits directly on active fault lines, making it incredibly vulnerable to devastating earthquakes. On top of that, semiconductor manufacturing requires absolute massive amounts of water. I mean, a single fab uses millions of gallons of ultra-pure water every single day, making the island's frequent and increasingly severe droughts a major operational risk.
And honestly, you wouldn't even need a kinetic war to trigger a global depression. A simple naval quarantine or blockade would halt roughly $2.45 trillion in annual trade. It would freeze global electronics production almost immediately, not just by stopping the export of chips, but equally critically, by cutting off the fuel and energy imports that Taiwan absolutely relies on, just to keep the lights on in those massive factories.
Chapter 5. The Global Scramble. So, the global response has been this massive wave of capital. Governments worldwide are now acutely aware of this profound vulnerability, and they're throwing tens of billions of dollars at reshoring efforts. You've got the U.S. CHIPS Act pumping $52 billion into domestic manufacturing, China's Big Fund 3 is injecting nearly $48 billion to achieve self-sufficiency, and India is rolling out major multi-billion-dollar incentive programs of their own. But here is the hard truth. Money alone cannot fix this. The supply chain infrastructure simply doesn't exist in the West right now. Replicating Taiwan's highly integrated, hyper-efficient ecosystem is virtually impossible under Western regulations and labor structures. Building out this kind of capacity, that is a race measured in decades, not years.
And here is the real fatal flaw in this whole global scramble: human capital. Look, even if you build a shiny new $40 billion factory in Arizona, you still need specialized engineers to actually run it. The U.S. is facing a projected shortfall of 146,000 semiconductor workers by 2029. South Korea and Japan are facing massive labor deficits as well. You simply cannot legislate a highly specialized, historically distinct workforce into existence overnight.
Which leaves us with this final open question to ponder. As the stakes get higher and these vulnerabilities become impossible to ignore, can the modern world actually build its way out of relying on one single island? Or will we remain forever tethered to a 100-mile stretch of coast before an earthquake, a drought, or a geopolitical crisis forces the issue?